So, Councillor MacKay, you had something you wished to raise at this point?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This time I'd like to raise a matter of personal privilege. At the last meeting during the debate on the MGA 571 inspection motion, Councillor Heron made some comments from which the general public has inferred that council, and myself and everyone on council, has instilled fear in the staff for their personal safety in the workplace, breached the council code of conduct, and breached the criminal code of Canada, on which an RCMP investigation is now underway. After receiving comments and phone calls and being pulled over in the grocery store this past week, I'd like this matter brought to the floor for clarification, withdrawal, and preferably including an apology to council and myself. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're asking something from Councillor Heron in public right now. Is that what you're asking for?
Yes, Mr.
Or you would like her to think about it and bring something another time? What are you asking for?
Right now would be good.
Councillor Heron, is this something you're prepared to speak to? I guess I don't want to turn this into...
No, I can adjust it real quickly.
Okay.
To all of my colleagues, my comments had in no way... I have a draft of what I said, and no way did it ever indicate that council was the cause of the complaints, and if it was interpreted that way, then I apologize. I did clarify with the Gazette that it was more of the public. I have no intention of betraying any confidences that staff have instilled in me. I can tell you one RCMP file that I do know is open because it's my own. In 2012-ish, I was receiving many lewd and inappropriate pictures and drawings that were sent to all the developers in the area that were threatening, and so after a few tears shed by myself, it was suggested that I turn them over to the RCMP. So they're just sitting there in an open file, and I can comment on that because it's my own. I will not comment on any others because they're not my own to disclose.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got something I'd like to put up on the screen here. So I appreciate the comments, but here is a transcript of exactly what was said at the last council meeting. If you could zoom in a little bit more, Mr. Belkey, just so I can read that off. So this is a transcript that I hand wrote after receiving some calls from residents, and it's the relevant portion of the meeting, and it's word for word. I may have one small error here and there, but it's accurate. The CAO is a wonderful employee, and we're supposed to hold him or her accountable for decisions council makes. Oh, sorry, we questioned his decisions. I think it was everyone's hope that the relationship with our former CAO and the termination thereof would put an end to the situation and allow us to move on. But sadly, through his departure, nothing has improved. The mess is perpetuated. Various council motions related to day-to-day operations of our city have been brought forward despite the hiring of an interim CAO that all of council unanimously supported. Obviously, members of council are not willing to let go and let the CAO do his job. I'm worried about the tone in some of the departments in City Hall, and I've heard from a few people that they are worried somewhat coming to work every day and for their safety. I've heard firsthand that the staff have asked for locks to be installed, and that certain departments and even the RCMP have had to intervene for staff's protection. I find this unacceptable. While I recognize that the actions of some members of the public are not the majority of opinion, we've gotten to the point that some people have lost faith in this council, and it's my hope to restore this faith. So from that, you can't say that there's any mention of the general public. That's a clear reference to council, instilling fear somehow in the staff, because there's no possible relevance that would have in the context of a 571 motion. And after having a week of receiving phone calls and talking to staff, I find that unacceptable. I find the explanation hardly accurate. I think the explanation that was alluded to in the St. Albert Gazette this past weekend also was unacceptable, whereby members of the public who oppose corruption in regards to the CCDO hiring at the city were somehow involved in making the staff here at the city feel unsafe, which allegedly led to locks being installed on doors, complaints with the Human Resources Department, and then subsequently complaints were allegedly filed with the RCMP, and supposedly an investigation is now underway. However, the city manager is unaware of any of these incidents, nor is the RCMP, arising from anything in regards to members of the public who opposed the hiring of Gilles Prefontaine for the CCDO position. In the article, Councillor Heron goes on to state that a member of the public dropped off a letter requesting the resignation of a staff member. which by all accounts is not a threat to anyone at the city. Further, the article goes on to attack members of council by stating that certain members are retweeting some of their comments and using the word corrupt to describe the hiring practice that led to a former councillor receiving a job at the city ahead of more qualified applicants, which is also not a safety threat to anyone, nor is there anything wrong with any of these actions. I have numerous problems with how this has been addressed. Firstly, the events described are false and never occurred, as evidenced by the fact that they cannot be corroborated by anyone else other than Councillor Heron. These events cited that they elicited fear amongst the staff, locks to be installed, and RCMP complaints are all denied by the RCMP and the city manager. I find it irresponsible to be making such allegations against members of the public, council, who happen to have a different set of ethical standards than Councillor Heron in regard to hiring practices at the city.
That's an unacceptable comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll carry on. Secondly is the condescending nature in which public criticism and opinion on ethical matters that have occurred at the city are dismissed by attempting to delegitimize the complaints by falsely accusing residents of St. Albert of making the staff at City Hall unsafe. I can't verify anything that was stated, and I doubt very much if anything that has been alleged is truthful. However, dropping off a letter at the City Hall is hardly a risk to staff safety. Tweeting or retweeting comments is not a risk to staff safety. Rather, residents have the right to communicate with city staff and elected officials through mail, Twitter, phone calls, or any other means of communication available. And in fact, I think this communication constitutes a democratic right. Thirdly, a comment was made by Councillor Heron in her 571 motion, which reads as follows. But sadly, through his departure, nothing has improved. The mess is perpetuated. Various council motions related to the day-to-day operation of our city have been brought forward despite the hiring of an interim CAO that all of council unanimously supported. Obviously, members of council are not willing to let go and let the CAO do his job. Regardless of the fact that council's job is to bring forward motions related to day-to-day operations of the city, the comment that members of council are not willing to let go is interesting because, in my opinion, what has to be let go are these false attacks on councillors' reputations by alleging staff abuse. When anyone questioned the opinion of our former city manager, an agenda package, or anything else, they were at risk of being accused of attacking the staff. The staff were leaving the employee of the city because council was asking tough questions. The staff were leaving the city because council changed the CAO's performance review to quarterly from annually. Unfortunately, these same attacks have continued despite the fact that we now have staff coming back to the city to work that had just recently left. I had a motion about parking in front of this chambers recently in which Councillor Heron stated that I was demonizing staff, even though the motion had nothing to do with that. And now council is making the staff at City Hall unsafe. It's time to stop making the staff at City Hall pawn in council debates and begin treating other members of council with the respect and maturity we all deserve as colleagues. No one here is abusing staff. And these allegations must end. There's nothing wrong with asking tough questions to get to the bottom of issues. Also, in contrast to Councillor Heron's comment where she states that, but sadly through his departure nothing has improved, I would argue that much has improved. This is highlighted by the fact that under our former CAO we had numerous high-level staff departures, and now some of these staff are returning to the city. In fact, I would call this a dramatic improvement, and also highlights to serve how ridiculous the idea that staff are leaving the city because of city council. If you have evidence of members of the public acting inappropriately, it's your obligation to bring these matters to the RCMP. However, in the more likely scenario, the events you described were not factual and did not occur. I would then advise you to do the right thing. Apologize to the members of the public whom you have insulted, and I've heard from over the week, and a council for presenting information that's not accurate. If not, at the very least, to retract your comments and set the record straight that we don't have a staff safety issue here at City Hall. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Business arising out of the presentations? I do have one. I would remind everyone that's been listening in the last 5 minutes that council approved $252,000, I think it's $252,500. I don't have the exact amount. Sounds pretty accurate. $252,000 to improve safety and security of public buildings in the corporation. Council approved that 7-0 last year. There must have been some reason we spent $252,000, and maybe we should get to the bottom of what the safety security issues are. Otherwise, council shouldn't have spent $252,000
Well,
or approved $252,000.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, if that's related to these comments, I agree, let's go to the RCMP and you can make your complaints, but the point I made was not related to that. That was a business case approved last year, which I supported. There's nothing related to staff safety or RCMP complaints that didn't occur.
Okay, thank you. Any other business arising from the presentations? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the Healing Garden funding, Ms. Kelly Jarrett, come on up, please.